The Mothman existed, the dark origin behind the American nightmare. It wasn't just a story. In the final months of 1966, something with glowing red eyes began appearing in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. It hovered above cars. It watched from rooftops. And 13 months later, the town's bridge collapsed into the freezing river below, killing 46 people. Coincidence? Or something far more disturbing? If you're drawn to hidden truths, dark legends, and the secret behind what we think we know, subscribe now, like this video, and join the discussion below. Your support helps us reveal the stories no one else dares to tell. For decades, the Mothman has been portrayed as a winged terror, some cryptid monster haunting the margins of American folklore. But what if we got it wrong? What if the monster wasn't the one bringing destruction, but the only one trying to stop it? From Cold War paranoia to declassified military experiments, from psychological symbols to mysteriously vanished witnesses. This is the version they never wanted you to hear, because the real story of the Mothman doesn't begin with fear. It begins with silence, and the people who finally broke it. Let's go back to where it all started. Before the headlines, before the panic, before the bridge fell. In the quiet town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, it started like a whisper in November 1966. Barely a rumor, barely a fear. Two young couples, driving to back roads near an abandoned TNT factory, swore they saw something not human. It had wings that stretched wider than a car, eyes glowing red in the darkness. The headlights caught it just long enough to see it lift off like a nightmare with muscle. They sped away, hearts pounding, unaware that what they witnessed would spark a legend that would haunt the nation. Newspapers labeled it the Mothman, a flying humanoid no one could explain. But America, still healing from the Kennedy assassination and racing toward the moon, was ready to believe in monsters again. The sightings didn't stop. Over the next 13 months, dozens of terrified residents described a similar figure, man-shaped gray or black, with wings and those same burning eyes. Some said it chased their cars. Others claimed it watched from rooftops or hovered silently near schools. It was never caught. No footprints. No feathers. No explanation. Just fear and shadows. The media ran with it. A local reporter began collecting stories, and soon the myth grew bigger than Point Pleasant. This wasn't just a cryptid. It was becoming a cultural phenomenon. Then came the collapse. On December 15th, 1967, the Silver Bridge, an aging suspension bridge connecting West Virginia and Ohio, gave way during rush hour. 46 people died. The town was shattered. Almost immediately, the Mothman legend changed. People started saying it wasn't a monster, but a warning, that its appearances were an omen, not an attack. Books followed, TV specials, a Hollywood movie. The story was polished and packaged. Mysterious creature appears before tragedy, then disappears forever. Case closed, right? But the more polished the story became, the more details were lost. What about the men in black who visited witnesses? What about the phone calls with mechanical voices? The nightmares residents reported long before the bridge ever fell? Those parts never made it into the version you know. Because the story you've heard about the Mothman is just the surface. Simple enough to be repeated, dark enough to be remembered, but the real terror lies beneath. And it's not what you think. What if the Mothman wasn't a monster at all? What if he was running too? What if the creature wasn't a threat, but a victim, or worse, a messenger no one wanted to hear? That's when things stop feeling like folklore and start sounding like cover-ups. And the moment we dig deeper into the historical record, military archives, and witness interviews, something far more disturbing starts to emerge. In 1966, America was holding its breath. The Cold War had settled over the country like a dark fog, thick with suspicion, ready to ignite. Point Pleasant wasn't immune to this paranoia. Just outside town, the abandoned TNT area, once used during World War II, stood in eerie silence. Locals whispered that strange lights flickered near the storage domes at night. Some claimed they heard humming beneath the earth, like machines still alive. These weren't just ghost stories. The land was federal property, with restricted zones and unmarked vehicles often spotted by hunters. Something was happening out there, and it wasn't just teenagers imagining monsters in the woods. Then came the helicopters. Black, unmarked, hovering over fields and rooftops with no explanation. Residents tried reporting them, but authorities offered no answers. Farmers woke up to mutilated cattle and burnt grass patterns in their pastures. The town's mayor wrote to state officials demanding clarification. He received none. That same month, sightings of the winged creature tripled. It wasn't just random fear anymore, it was systemic. The town was being watched, studied, or warned. But by who? And why? What was the connection between these military intrusions and the eyes in the sky? Documents declassified decades later revealed that Point Pleasant sat within a map zone for psychological operations experiments. One report listed the TNT area as a potential field for civilian reaction testing under nocturnal stress conditions. This wasn't fiction, it was policy. The U.S. government had already run similar tests using staged events to measure panic responses. Could the Mothman have been a side effect of something far larger and more dangerous? A byproduct of mass fear or a test subject itself? And then there were the dreams. Dozens of residents began reporting the same thing. Waking up in cold sweats, seeing visions of metal structures collapsing, of water swallowing cars. These premonitions were dismissed by psychologists as stress-induced. But after the bridge fell, their accounts gained eerie weight. Some even drew the silver bridges, designed in notebooks before the collapse. It wasn't just what people saw, it was what they felt, as if something beyond human understanding was pressing it on them, silently. So when the Mothman appeared, Point Pleasant was already fraying at the edges. The question isn't why they believed. It's why the sightings aligned so perfectly with silent incursions, classified tests, and collective dread. Maybe they weren't imagining a monster. Maybe they were sensing something real, something they were never supposed to name. By early 1967, the reports were no longer just about the creature. People began to disappear. Linda Scarberry, one of the first witnesses, confided in close friends that she felt watched, even inside her home. One night, she found a family dog dead on the porch, eyes wide open, body intact but stiff as stone. Her neighbors claimed to see dark figures in suits knocking on doors and speaking in flat, robotic voices. These were the infamous men in black, not agents of the FBI, but something else, untraceable, unregistered, and never mentioned in any official file. When a local reporter tried to investigate, his notes were stolen from his car overnight. No glass broken, no forced entry, just missing pages and a growing sense that someone or something wanted the story buried. That spring, a man named Woodrow Derenberger appeared on a local TV broadcast claiming he had met a being called Injured Cold, a smiling, inhuman figure that communicated telepathically. He insisted this being warned of disasters coming, including the fall of bridges. The public dismissed it as nonsense. But weeks later, his phone line was tapped. His children reported seeing tall, silent figures watching their school. Woodrow's neighbors found strange burn marks in his yard. Even the sheriff's office noted increased reports of intruders wearing identical black suits and speaking without blinking. These weren't isolated hallucinations. They were shared experiences, synchronized like a script unfolding in real time. And then came December 15th, 1967. Rush hour. The Silver Bridge, packed with commuters heading home for the holidays, began to shake. A single eye-bar gave way. A mechanical flaw, they said. The structure collapsed into the Ohio River. Cars plunging, lives ending in cold, black water. 46 people died. But the town's grief was soon overshadowed by something stranger. Silence. Witnesses who had spoken to the press stopped answering calls. Families who had seen the Mothman were never interviewed again. Even the newspapers began to redirect their stories. The national narrative was set. This was a tragedy, nothing more. But locals knew otherwise. Many claimed the creature was seen perched above the bridge days before it fell. Some even said it screamed the night before, an unearthly shriek no one could describe. After the collapse, all sightings ceased. The Mothman vanished. But in his place, a new terror remained. The fear that someone had been trying to warn them. One local woman, whose name was redacted from government records, kept a diary during that year. Found in the ruins of her home decades later, one page stood out. They keep saying he's evil, but what if he was screaming for us? Not at us? The page was torn at the bottom. No other entries remained. It was never entered into the official archives. But the existence of the diary itself points to a chilling possibility. What if the Mothman wasn't the cause, but the consequence of something even darker? And that's the detail the public was never told. Because while the creature was easy to mock or mythologize, the truth about the bridge, the disappearances, and the silencing of voices was harder to dismiss. Too real, too coordinated, too threatening. As one former police officer later stated in a documentary interview before vanishing himself, it wasn't a monster story. It was a containment operation. And whatever they were trying to contain failed. That failure cost 46 lives. And it begs a question that haunts Point Pleasant to this day. What was the Mothman really trying to stop? For decades, monsters have served a purpose. They carry our fears when we can't name them. But what if the Mothman wasn't a threat, but reflection? Psychologists reviewing the case years later suggested that collective trauma may have shaped the sightings. A town under pressure, surrounded by silence, secrecy, and tragedy, could project its unease onto a figure. Not a demon, but a mirror. And if the Mothman represented something real, grief, warning, or unhealed pain, then maybe the reason he vanished wasn't because the danger ended, but because the message was ignored, or worse, erased. The few survivors who dared speak years later didn't describe a beast. They described presence. Heavy silence before sightings. Flickering electronics. The feeling of being seen from within. Some claim the Mothman appeared only near those carrying deep personal sorrow. A grieving widow. A veteran with PTSD. A child who stopped speaking after a fire. Each reported feeling calm, even protected. This isn't behavior we'd expect from a predator. Could it be that the Mothman came not to destroy, but to witness? To mourn with them in silence? Folklorists began to interpret the creature symbolically. Its wings, escape from fate. Its eyes, unblinking truth. Its timing, always just before disaster. In many mythologies, winged figures act as guardians, harbingers, or even angels of death. But the American narrative needed a villain. And so, the one being who may have tried to help was branded a monster. Some believe this rebranding wasn't accidental. Fear is easier to control than empathy. Monsters make better headlines than messengers. And in a Cold War society obsessed with containment, perhaps the most dangerous thing Mothman carried wasn't death, but meaning. And then there's what he didn't do. He never attacked, never destroyed property, never harmed a soul. In every account, he simply appeared and disappeared. He watched, he followed, he warned. That alone subverts everything we know about creatures of folklore. Legends demand conflict. But the Mothman gave only warnings. What kind of monster wants to prevent suffering? Unless, of course, it's not a monster at all. What if we only called it that to silence the truth it was trying to deliver? Which leads us to the final, most disturbing question of all. If the Mothman was trying to communicate, what else was he warning us about? If his presence was tied to tragedy, then where did he go next? Or has he never left, merely waiting in the margins of other disasters, still unheard, still watching, still trying to speak through the shadows? Point Pleasant never fully recovered, not because of the bridge or the rumors or the creature itself, but because something deeper was broken, the illusion that we are always in control. The Mothman became a symbol, not just of fear, but of how we handle the unknown. We need stories like his not to explain the chaos, but to survive it. In a world of hidden truths and sudden tragedies, we cling to figures who warn us, who stand at the edge of the darkness and say, without words, be ready. Maybe we never listened because we didn't want to believe. Maybe monsters are easier than mirrors. If the Mothman was real, he challenged the very structure of how we process disaster. We want clean explanations, steel fatigue, human error, tragic chance. But what if the root of catastrophe lies not in mechanics, but in patterns we ignore? What if intuition, collective anxiety, and unseen warnings matter more than reports and paperwork? The legend of the Mothman reminds us that truth doesn't always come from authority. Sometimes it comes from silence, from shadows, from places too strange to make sense, until it's too late. We tell stories to protect ourselves, to give shape to fear, to name what cannot be explained. The Mothman is no different. Whether he was a cryptid, a spirit, a government experiment, or all three, he stands as a warning we fail to hear. And maybe that's why his wings haunt us still. Not because of what he did, but because of what we didn't do. We saw him, we recorded him, but we refuse to believe him. And in doing so, we miss a chance to rewrite our ending. There is a strange comfort in thinking he's gone. But for those who listen closely, who stand in the quiet just before the storm, some swear they still feel him watching, not with menace, but with mourning, as if he too is tired of repeating a message no one will ever fully receive. And that's the burden of a messenger condemned to be a myth, to keep warning a world that isn't ready to listen until it's broken once more. So maybe the question isn't whether the Mothman was real. Maybe the real question is, are we finally ready to understand what he tried to tell us? If this story made you question everything you thought you knew, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We uncover the hidden truths behind the myth America grew up with. Stories not meant to be forgotten. Become a member to help us keep revealing what lies beneath the legend. More tales like this are on the way. Don't miss the next chilling revelation.